Tonight on the show, Snake Eyes says Street Fighter players are the best. Leffen wants some money matches, and Infiltration finally gets signed. Duncan, what do you want to talk about?
Anime?
You're watching Best of 3.
Games.
Welcome to Best of 3, guys, our weekly FGC talk show presented by the Daily Dot, shot in a studio here in Austin, Texas. As always, I'm your host, Efren Salinas, joined by my co-host, Michael Donka Schiller. And tonight, we're joined by two very special guests. We have, as always, from Event Hubs, John Velociraptor Guerrero, and the man, the myth, the legend, Ace King of Suit, also known as Steven Jurek. Guys, Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to actually do something somewhere. I don't know.
That's exactly how I feel about it, Steven. John, how do you feel about it?
I was going to say exactly what he said, so just quotation marks.
All right, guys, so we have a lot of cool things to talk about today. It's going to be slightly looser in that we don't have a main guest that we're going to be interviewing. We're going to be just talking about certain topics. And let's get started with this. The worst kept secret. Last week, a tweet goes out from Team Razer. It's a picture of it can only be Infiltration saying, guess who is going to get signed? And of course, during the Capcom Pro Tour Asia finals, or during that event, it was announced that in fact, Infiltration has been signed by Team Razer. So guys, right off the bat, how do we all feel about Infiltration finally getting signed? The fact that he was one of the most stacked free agent guys that was still out there.
To me, it's interesting because a guy like Infiltration was so successful across multiple games, won a car, won a bunch of money.
That's right,
Street Fighter Cross Tekken and Street Fighter 4. You would think that he was offered sponsorships like crazy compared to other people, and he was pretty marketable. He had a successful stream later on. It makes you wonder how long he was shopping around for that deal at this point.
Is that what you think it was?
I think so, because I'm sure he was offered at least something else. But obviously, FGC deals are shady. We saw Kazunoko get thrown under the bus. So, I mean, he did a good job, waited, and ended up with one of the most reputable sponsors, for sure. So, I mean, it worked out for him, if that's indeed what he did.
Mm-hmm. I mean, but the whole thing about signing players, I mean, that's been heating up recently, presumably in anticipation of Street Fighter V, or maybe just because we're reaching that. I know you guys love that esports talk, reaching that critical mass esports levels. He could have gotten on Team MadCatz, on Team EG, on Red Bull even.
Maybe, yeah.
How do you guys think about Infiltration being signed by Team Razer?
It's a huge victory for Razer. I am impressed that, or surprised, I should say, that he wasn't sponsored earlier. And it has to be his choice because these guys were going up to him. He's so versatile in Street Fighter, and he's shown his ability in other games. He's an 09er, so this isn't coming from a huge background of playing. This is I picked this game up a few years ago, and I'm already one of the best. There was a time when he was almost indisputably the best. That was back, I believe, in 2012 when he won EVO.
Yeah.
So, good job, Team Razer. Other guys, pull your heads out of your asses. You missed out on a huge opportunity here. But yeah, he's just as strong as Razer was. Now they're ridiculous.
And I reached out to the Team Razer global esports guy, the guy that oversees all of their esports operations. And I said, hey, we want a quote from Infiltration. We want a quote from one of you guys on the team. And it made it into Steven's article, which is on our site, Infiltration Science with Team Razer. And this was the quote, and I'm going to bring it up here. Straight from the article. Quote, "This year will be even more exciting," said new teammate Xian shortly before the presentation at Capcom Pro Tour Asia. Quote, "With Infiltration joining Team Razer, our roster of players has never looked stronger." Now, that's an obvious quote that you would hear from somebody on the team. The question is, how much did Xian have to do, potentially, with Infiltration signing with Team Razer? Did he say, come with us? Did he have anything to do with that courtship? I would imagine so.
I think, we saw a couple hints that Shen was tweeting out. So I think he was instrumental in getting him in. Not just for, hey, come to this team, but also for actually convincing him that Razer was the right fit. To what you guys were talking about earlier, Infiltration a few weeks ago, he did an AMA on Reddit on our Kappa in a video interview, and he was asked about why he wasn't sponsored. And what he said was, Back in 2012, he was sponsored by Western Wolves, which was kind of sub-sponsored by MadCatz. He said that he didn't get the kind of support that he expected, that he thought that he should be getting. Mm-hmm. So he was very, very cautious once that deal ended about signing with not just any team, but the right team. And obviously what Razer's done with Shen, what they've done with Fudo, RB, Gact, even though Idazan's not there anymore, I believe they're still on very good terms. So I think he was instrumental in assuring him that, yes, Razer is the right fit for you and they're going to do good by you.
If I'm not mistaken, Western Wolves now has 801 Strider, right? Or is that Winter Fox? Okay, good point.
I thought the same thing for a split second. Though.
Thank you, Stephen, for correcting me. But you bring up the topic of all those names that are on this Team Razer. You could make the argument that is, I mean, they have a ton of Evo champs on there.
Perfect Legend.
Oh, okay, listen. Perfect Legend is an Evo champ, okay? Do not forget that he's a two-time Evo champ, okay? But you have Fudo Evo champ, you have Xian Evo champ, and now you have Infiltration. Is that the best team? And this is the topic, right? Now, who has the best team in the FGC? You have Team Razer, which could make that argument and say they're the top spot. You have Team EG with some of our American boys and Momochi and others. You have Team MadCatz. You know, those are like OG legends, right? And, of course, Team Red Bull, who is putting up some interesting or some really big numbers with Snake Eyez and Bonchan. So, John, I'll let you take it here because Event Hubs has a post up right now, don't they?
Yeah, I just threw one up about an hour ago or so, asking people, and you can go there right now and vote. I think it's the top one on our page, of who you think is the strongest. And right now, in the lead, but a pretty commanding lead, is indeed Team Razer. And I think that boils down to the fact that on paper, yes, they have 3 Evo champions, and plus a pretty good bench. Razer's a pretty big team with people like Gact and RB, and then you have like MadCatz, they've got 3 representatives, to my knowledge, off the top of my head. But those representatives are Tokido, Mago, and then Daigo. And Daigo is always going to be in the running for the best fighting, or at least Street Fighter player in the world.
Whatever team he's on is the best team. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not saying that necessarily, but if you have Daigo on your team, he's like the first pick. And that's debatable, but in my eyes, he's still the first pick. You jump over to Evil Geniuses, though, and you've got a very arguable second pick, sometimes a first pick, in Momochi being the Evo champion this year and the Capcom Cup champion of last year. Like, no one else has got that kind of stuff under their belt like that. So he's super hot right now. Daigo's never like not hot. And then Red Bull, I think that they're up and coming, and they're up and coming in a big way. But yeah, they've only got 2 guys on there. Those 2 guys are powerhouses. But
John, how hot would you say Daigo is?
Daigo, he's been working out a lot. No,
no, but I mean, okay, so that's MadCatz. When you can't mention Evil Geniuses without saying, and I know we're talking Street Fighter, but they have PPMD. You mentioned Perfect Legend, who's not a Street Fighter player, so we can go outside of Street Fighter. PPMD is some god tier stuff right there.
There's no question that the teams have different goals in who they're signing, and that despite the fact that we're talking about who's the best, and that is, you know, an argument, that wasn't necessarily the goal of any of the teams and who they sponsored. K-Brad's a top player, but he's probably not exactly the same level as a couple of these other guys. And then Ricky and Justin are American legends who were early on the team before any of that happened, along with PR Rog. So, I mean, they were going after an American market, obviously, at least early on. Mm-hmm. Razer started off with Perfect Legend, a Mortal Kombat player. So where they've branched out to and where they started off varies extremely based on like who they were trying to market to in the first place. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to say whether or not being the best is exactly relevant in what they were going for. I mean, Team Liquid has NuckleDu and no one else, and they've said they have no interest in getting anyone else right now.
I mean, they have a lot of Smash players, right?
Right.
It's interesting. How do you guys feel about the way that some of these esports teams pick their players?
Well, I think right now what Donka was talking about, just getting the best players, ranking them from 1 to 5 in terms of talent, isn't necessarily going to give you the best team. And sponsors are coming in because they feel like they can get at least somewhat of a return on investment. And that isn't just through talent. That's through marketability, likability. You mentioned K-Brad. K-Brad is probably not a favorite to win Evo, but he's a very good player. He's a very strong, likable personality. He goes out, he represents the brand well. So he is someone who brings value to EG. Justin Wong is the same way, but I would say probably higher on the talent side. And he's a guy that's an American legend, like you said. He shows up at a tournament, it's a legit tournament now.
Yeah.
Because, oh my God, Justin's there.
Exactly. At Evo, I spoke with AJ, the team manager for Evil Geniuses, and he echoed what we're saying about K-Brad. He says it's harsh, right? And he even said it, like, I'm going to sound...
Nobody expects anything from him?
No, not that nobody expects anything from him, but nobody expects him to win or take an Evo or anything like that. But, quote, the sponsors love him. So he's on the team, right? I mean, you have Maximilian signed by MadCatz, don't you? But Maximilian does, internet content and media of that kind, and K-Brad is specifically a tournament player. Is it fair to say that, because the dude tried his heart out?
I mean, he's still one of the closest players to making Capcom Cup. He was right off the money, and he's done very well at tournaments with very big names and beaten very big players. He's obviously a top player, but yeah, weighing the scales, it just depends on what you're good at and how good you are to market, just as Steven said.
It's super, super important to have that versatility on your team. And like you were talking about with having Maximilian there to represent a whole other side of the FGC. You've got Momochi, you've got Justin Wong to win your tournaments for you on AG, but then you have K-Brad to get Stone Cold Stunners going and get representation on ESPN and all over. Like never ever will you get rid of K-Brad if you're EG, because he offers you so much more in just a different avenue. But yeah, if we're just talking talent, not so much.
Yeah, I feel like we're bagging on K-Brad. He's really good.
Of course he is. He's a fucking legend. He can beat all of us here on this dais for sure.
Except in Marvel.
He's in a format right now with all the international travel where, if he's, before, if you were the fifth best player in the world, you wouldn't face the other four players until Evo. Now you're seeing these guys every week. So if a K-Brad who might have won like 3 or 4 tournaments a few years ago, but at the same skill level, just isn't, because the competition at every event is just so much higher now.
All right, guys, let me throw a new spin on this topic here. I work for the Daily Dot. It's that we have a strong esports section, and yes, my interest is fighting games, but I hear the conversations that all our reporters are having about all these League of Legends roster changes. Why am I bringing this up? This is not a League of Legends show. I'll tell you why. When players move from team to team, it is big news. People lose their shit over it. In the fighting games world, who cares? It's still an individual sport. Does it matter what team you're on? Does it even matter?
It's been a big issue, and it's been bitchy. Why do you even sponsor these people? There's no team aspect to the game whatsoever. The prize winnings aren't as big, so you're not going to make as much off of that. There isn't nearly as much to sell with the FGC, whereas computers have RAM and hard drives and any one of these components you can sell. Fighting games have a stick or like a pad or something like that. So it's been, why would a team pick up a player, and why does it matter who's on what team? But I think there's definitely an avenue in the future for team battles to be a real thing. We had at, I believe it was E3, it was one of the tournaments that had Street Fighter V early. There was a team versus team thing going on. It was really fun to watch, in my opinion, with like the US and then versus Team Razer versus Team etc.
And Canada Cup did that, right?
And Canada Cup did that, although it wasn't specifically with teams yet. And as these teams grow larger, I think that may be a real avenue. I think there should probably be a tournament dedicated to it at some point, but that's going a lot further than the scope of the show.
Somebody get Jabali on the scene. That dude has done a regular tournament, anime tournament, Street Fighter V only tournament. Can we get a team tournament going? I think that would be exciting. Velociraptor.
Yeah, I was actually hoping to get in on this a little bit earlier, but yeah, we were talking about how we have, Team MadCatz, Team EG, they're like 3 or 4 or 5 players deep right now. But what's going to happen in the coming years as we have all these corporations, again, pumping money into this, paying more attention and organizing events? How could it not blow up to the levels of actual team league play? Yes, Street Fighter is primarily a 1v1 kind of game, but we do team tournaments and that kind of thing. As soon as there's a market for it, as soon as we have big enough teams to make these kind of big exhibitions and team tournaments, you know that's going to be part of it. It just has to be. So give it a year, give it 2 years time, and I think these teams are going to be a lot bigger than they are right now, and you're going to have a lot more team-based mentality and team representation.
And
I'm sorry.
Yeah. What do you got, Steve? Go ahead, Steve.
Do you think, John, that format would be in any way dominant at some events, or do you think it will still be just like a side event, which is a cool, nice little thing, and maybe 1 or 2 tournaments dedicated to that? Because honestly, that's where I see it. I don't think that this is ever going to be a team-based game, just because Street Fighter at its core is you versus one opponent, one v one.
Whereas League of Legends is teams, right? I mean, it's like a team versus a team, and obviously that's a very important distinction. But you were saying, John.
Well, it's hard to say right now, but if I want to picture this kind of a thing in the future, I would see it as it's still going to boil down to individual matches, but you got to think these companies are going to create some kind of a model where the focus goes onto the teams as opposed to the individuals. The individuals are going to generate points or however the system works, but it's going to be I think they're going to direct it in that direction of it's all about the team. The team is going to have a certain amount of points. I can see like a Capcom Pro Tour style model with teams on it as opposed to individual names. Now, something like that.
Now, a couple of points here. One, I personally think teams are awesome. Team tournaments are awesome. You get that mentality. Who are we throwing up first? Also, the innate excitement of somebody OCVing a team. You know, there's a lot of drama that can be built into that.
And in Japan and SBO, Togeki, like team tournaments pretty much dominated the format there for a long time before we ever had major
and how did that do?
At all. They were watched more so in Japan than here, obviously, and it was before the fighting game scene blew up as heavy. But I mean, people look back at those things as extremely hype, and to this day, before Togeki finally died, most of them were still team events. So it's dominant in the anime and arcade format over there, where they have to jam a bunch of people into one arcade. So they kind of did it out of necessity, but I do think that keeping, one character per team adds diversity to the game. You see a lot more characters. You see characters win in best of 1 format more than they would in 2 out of 3. So, you get to see these weirder characters. People like it. Will it be as big? Probably not. And will people care about roster changes? Probably not. But there's fun to be had.
The other thing we're not mentioning, and is to y'all's point, is we had a guy like Snake Eyez come on the show and say, I left first-person shooters because I hated being on a team. I wanted to be the only one that was responsible for whether I win or lose. So, I mean, of course, there's that to think about. Final thoughts on teams and Infiltration getting signed by Team Razer.
If I extend what we were talking about into the even greater future, I won't say that I know what's going to happen, but I think that I can see the corporations and those with the money trying to organize this team idea and trying to do that for maybe a year or 2. But yes, you guys are right in the sense that it is a 1v1 game, and I can also very easily see that model not really being as successful. But I would be surprised if they didn't try it, even if it doesn't work out in the long run.
Totally, because I mean, StarCraft had team events where they threw up one person versus each, kind of similar to how we do tournaments at this point. They even tried 2v2, which was kind of a gimmicky format, and they were really popular, but they were definitely side to the major tournaments, which were 1v1. And yeah, as Steven said, that's probably how it'll end up, as a side event.
So we were talking about Snake Eyez here for a second. Let's move on to another topic. Gootecks and Mike Ross put out a really cool interview with Snake Eyez. It's a 30-minute long interview, and the first thing off the bat, the first thing you hear in this video is Snake Eyez saying that the top players in Street Fighter, look, he's doing it with his hand right there. You can see him? Look, this is where Street Fighter players are, and that's where everybody else is. He's saying that the top, like the work and the mentality and like literally the mind game of these players in Street Fighter is higher than in other games. I only really play Street Fighter. You play Marvel and a bunch of anime games. Is that fair to say?
I think in America, at the very least, he's no question correct. And as someone who plays other games over Street Fighter 4, I'm not afraid to admit that. It makes sense that the most popular game, the game with the most money on the line, and the game where champions of previous games are coming to because of all this money and attention, would have players working the hardest and the most talented players drawn to it. That being said, I think it's a bit naive to dismiss, corner cases in other games. Even in older Street Fighter games, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, the best player of that game, Kuroda, is the best with like 3/4 of the cast. Like, I would say his level at that game is higher than any Street Fighter 4 level player. And there's tons of BlazBlue and Guilty Gear players in Japan who play and grind and dominate the game way harder than any Street Fighter 4 player. But that could very well be because the breadth of talent is thinner.
But I mean, how do you even quantify something like that?
It's hard to quantify something like that.
Well, let me ask you this. Think about Tokido. Think about Kazunoko, known for their Street Fighter top, maybe 10 in the world. But those guys, Tokido also plays, was it King of Fighters, right?
He's played in plenty of games, yes.
Yeah, and those guys are heavyweights in those games as well. Even though their main games are now Street Fighter 4 and they do as well as they do, and how many hours of practice has to go into that for them to be this consistent all the time. So I think one of the arguments you have to bring up is look at the top Street Fighter players. How many of them are also top players, albeit maybe not the best, but also very high-ranked players in other games, like the anime games and such?
Oh, totally. I mean, yeah, Kazunoko sweeps most Guilty Gear tournaments he comes to in America, and yeah, is a Street Fighter player mainly, and Justin Wong doesn't do as well in Street Fighter as he does in other games. I think it'd be hard to argue against it on a base level. I just think there should be eyes on other games as a whole, and that there are other players who do stand out in other games. But yeah, I mean, it's the most popular game. It's going to be...
We have somebody in the chat, Carnage, is saying that I'm misunderstanding what Snake Eyes meant. He says fighting games over other games, like all other games, not Street Fighter versus other fighting games.
You think he means versus other games? I think he's insane.
So why would you say that?
The Koreans in StarCraft literally live in houses and play for like 13 to 14 hours a day. It's their job. And a lot of them have come out after quitting and say they didn't even like it anymore because they were grinded so hard into the ground. I mean, the players of those games are on a level. I think Street Fighter has so far to evolve compared to these other games that you can't compare them at all. The top players are still missing punishes and getting excited about, Momochi punishing like heavy kick with stand jab into Tatsu. In other games, that's just a fact of life.
I hear
you. So just do your job, man.
What do you mean by that, John?
To your point, it is a job. It's not, we really don't have many players who are pushing their games at a level that you would need to bring it to the highest level because they can't afford to spend all of their time on it. The only ones who can are playing Street Fighter because that's that's where the money is.
Totally.
So it's not, in the US, maybe the top Street Fighter players are at a higher level than the top players at other games, but I don't think it's necessarily inherent with Street Fighter. I think that's just how it's playing out right now. If Arc Revo Cup was paying out $250,000, if EGL, was paying out $250,000, I think we might be seeing a little different tune.
So you're saying
EGL,
that
by the way?
It's Street Fighter's... I'm sorry?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Okay. So you're saying that Street Fighter is the biggest, baddest guy right now. Therefore, it's going to have the biggest sample, the biggest population. And naturally, what's going to happen in just a community like this is that people are going to be good at fighting games over specific games. Like they're going to know the chess match. They're going to know how to manipulate other people regardless of the tools they have at their disposal, the tools being the specific game they're playing. So Street Fighter has a big population to choose from, so it only makes sense that you're going to get most of your guys that are good at fighting games in general out of that population.
Well, what I'm saying is, if you're someone like Chris G, who is probably the most dominant player in Marvel, or at least one of them, and you have a chance to spend all your time practicing Marvel and going out to tournaments and winning $1,000, or practicing Street Fighter, going out to tournaments and winning $15,000. And if you finish outside the top three, you still get a couple thousand for Street Fighter. You don't even cover your trip going to Marvel. Not many people are going to commit all of that time to Marvel because they simply can't afford to. So the players who are good enough to push the game to that higher level, most of them are going to Street Fighter because, that's just where the bread is buttered right now.
It is.
So that's going to take away from the idea that Street Fighter 4 requires that amount of skill and such to play I guess, and to clear it up earlier, I think there was a question from the chat. I think Snake said directly, it's Street Fighter 4 players are the best overall players as compared to any other fighting game, is what I believe he said. And I think that automatically implies that Street Fighter 4 is the type of game that is, I don't know, so technical, that requires so much thought, whatever it is, it requires you being so good that you're going to naturally be the best at other things too. But if I'm right, then what you're saying is, what Steve's saying is that it's more about the money that's being pumped into Street Fighter, and that's why there's the focus there.
Well, for the select few who are have a chance to be the elite of the elite, I would say that the money is not to say that there aren't really good players in other games. I'm not saying that at all.
Right.
What I'm saying is, you can't get to that level putting in part-time for the game. You have to treat it like a job.
Man, that's nuts, dude. I would hate for that to be my job, and then for my scene to dry up, or Marvel. People in the chat are talking about how Chris G makes baby money compared to what the CPT is paying out.
Baby money.
But the thing is, it's
weird.
It's a gamble,
game
though,
that's
isn't it?
going to dry out, and that's part of why I've spent less attention on anime and plan on playing Street Fighter V when it comes out, despite not liking Street Fighter 4 and playing it much as all. It's weird being in a scene that dies compared to Street Fighter. Street Fighter 4 has gotten bigger as it's gone on, and now there's a ton of money being pumped into it. Whereas when a different version of an anime game comes out, it can be a totally different anime game. People tend to just jump ship on the older ones, and you're ending up at 5-man tournaments on the gazebo outside the hotel instead of even in the thing. And I can tell you, I've played in those tournaments and I've enjoyed them, but it's not something that you're going to as Steven said, you're not going to dedicate 12 hours a day to do that. It's just not practical. It doesn't make sense. You're not going to make any money off it. You're not even going to get the same glory off it or have the same people to practice with. If there's only 20 people playing your game, you're not going to get the same, breadth of experience, and then you're just going to lose to Japan. But now I'm ranting.
Donko, what are you fighting for, the money or the glory?
Well, it's definitely both, because Blaze Blue had the biggest pot 2 years ago when it was at Evo, and then we got top 3 winning 3 matches in the 3v3 tournament and won $500, which is way better than you do winning 3 matches any other game. And the first place got to go to Japan for free. And they made a bunch of money. So there's money in other games, and ArcSys, the company that makes a bunch of the most popular anime games, is throwing money out there. But clearly there's a little bit more than that, and people like having the competition, someone to play on Xbox Live, someone to play next to them, and in America that's on Street Fighter. And as we've said on the show earlier, interestingly enough, in Japan, Blaze Blue was a more popular arcade game than Street Fighter 4 for a long time. And Tekken's way more popular than either of them.
Well, Tekken, it's a fun game. I wanted to revisit something from last week in the context of this conversation now, and it was, this guy's talking about dying games, right? Alex Valle said, if you want your game to be represented, you got to show up and you got to support the community and all that shit. How do you do that? How do you physically do that? Do you get on the Facebook groups? Do you, because, we have guys that are trying to do King of Fighters groups here in Austin, and yeah, there's a group, but it's not growing, and that guy's putting his time. Talking about Benji.
Yeah.
How would you guys suggest to our audience at home grow their game?
You bring it to your outing. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Same thing. We've got in our Twin City scene, there is this one guy who every week to casuals, he will bring his laptop, hook up 2 controllers, and just play Skullgirls. And if anyone wants to join in, they can hop on the sticks and play. And that's really how you got to do it. If I'm not going to win any Capcom Pro Tour events, unfortunately. I play because I love the game. I want other people to play with me because I enjoy playing these games, and I think they would also enjoy playing those games. So you just got to put it in front of people, let them play it, and hopefully something clicks, enough people stick to it, and speaking of Skullgirls, last year, Combo Breaker, it had, for a while, the second biggest turnout there, for Skullgirls, a game that struggles to get 20, 30 people at a lot of events. The community decided, hey, we are going to show up. They wanted an event that they would support, just give them a chance to show up, and they'll show up. and they showed up in a big way. So.
Yes, and you have a guy like Sonic Fox professing his love for, and that's a big name, and that's a young guy that can corral, a new scene and bring fresh blood into a scene. Even with that guy on there, I mean, I'm sure Skullgirl's got a shot in the arm, but I'm not sure that it's blown up now.
It's doing
no, and it might not.
John?
It might not. But like Steve brought up a good point. I'm not going to win any major tournaments. I'm not going to be on any Capcom Pro Tour. That's the majority of the players. You go to EVO, and in the first few hours, thousands of people are already out of the tournament. They're not there to win. They're not there to make the money. And yes, the money is nice. The money makes us interested and like, oh, I want to see who wins the money. But at the end of the day, you're there because your game is fun to play. You have fun playing against other people. And if you believe that, and obviously you would if it's a game that you especially like, then yes, you bring it to your casuals. You bring it to wherever you're going. And maybe you're the only one with the setup and it's really sad and everyone sees you in the corner. But hey, people are going to come over and play with you. And when they see your enthusiasm, you share it with them and you say, this is what's fun about the game. Play with me, whatever. That's the bottom line if you want to keep something going. And the bottom line is not get on Twitter and whine and bitch about things. It's not go on social media and say, why isn't my game represented? It's bring it out and show your enthusiasm for it.
Is that what people are doing, John?
Yes. Have you been on Twitter?
I have been, but I like that you've attached a voice to that already.
I would just like to reiterate one note that both of them made up, which is that there are typically tournaments that are major, definitely not Street Fighter level, but for smaller games, and just seek that out for people who are, this is just advice for people who are playing some of these smaller games, just seek that out. NEC, I promise you will have any anime game that you've ever looked to play. We'll have a huge scene to play it. As he mentioned, Combo Breaker is absolutely huge for Skullgirls, or it was in the past at least, and I know MKX has its fair share of bigger tournaments as well. So, I mean, yeah, just be on the lookout for that.
And I think also that we have sort of a problem in the community where we see, Street Fighter at the top, and if it's not Street Fighter, it's a dead game. No games.
There are so many things like that. Yeah.
You show
There's
up.
a lot of negativity.
If you got 5 people showing up playing a game, your scene's still alive. You play. Eventually, someone's gonna see something they like, check it out, give it a shot, and you're still gonna have fun playing. So.
All right, guys. We were talking about money a second ago. Who's going to win the money? Let's talk about money in a different context. Money matches. This is a predominantly FGC show, and there's this fake division between, well, maybe not so fake, division between FGC and Smash. But I want to talk about Smash for a second. Leffen, who, in my limited knowledge, appears to be the F-champ of Melee. Is that fair to say?
He's a
He's
villain.
the villain?
Similar, he's much more villainous, though.
Okay, well...
It's because of his hair. First and foremost, it's his hair.
Speaking of his hair, let me get this cool little video. I shot this at, pardon me, at EVO, and it'll be playing here in a second. But he called out a couple players and to $1,000 money matches.
Mm-hmm.
Money matches. I know we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about Melee here, but I'm interested in the money match, and $1,000 money match at that. First, he called out, let me make sure I'm getting this right.
SFAT.
SFAT, yes. Who, by the way, if you are a regular viewer of Daily Dot Live Programming, on Thursday for our Smash Brothers AMA, he is our guest. So if you want to hear what he has to say about Leffen, you'll likely be able to get that answered on Thursday at same hour. $1,000 money match. He says, let's see here, because these guys are really talking trash to each other. He says, trying so hard to get that shit started, and it's all empty talk. $1,000 money match, first to 5. Take it or shut the F up. Money matches in fighting games. Good or bad? Does it pull it? I mean, because it separates itself from a tournament, really. It doesn't have to be at a tournament. It usually happens at a tournament. But it's life outside the tournament to a degree. Or how do you guys feel about money matches?
It's already happened outside of tournament multiple times this year. SFAT and Leffen have played, not on stream, not in the tournament, but they've played money matches already this year. And I think, to my knowledge, SFAT has won 2 of them, and I don't know how many were played, but I guess the point I'm trying to make there is that SFAT has beaten Leffen. But SFAT has not beaten Leffen on stage, on a stream, and for this much money. And I think that Leffen, that you could make the argument that he's going to show up to play, and he's going to show up all the way, and maybe he hasn't before. But I mean, it's already been going on.
But do you like money matches? You've participated in a money match or two, I would imagine.
I mean, I'm the most conservative money match player of all time. I typically only play money matches I will win. But,
That's right.
But money matches are an interesting thing because some people, no matter how good they are, no matter how confident they are, they may beat you, aren't interested or financially stable enough to offer the amount of money. Some people are scared of that. For some people, that's what makes them come out and play 20 times harder. Fnatic said 1,000,000 times that tournament doesn't even matter to him. It's all about the money. And that's a Marvel player. So it kind of gets ingrained in how the community as a whole functions. In Marvel, money matches are a really big deal. If you beat some guy in a tournament, he's probably going to challenge you to a money match. In Street Fighter, they're kind of a late night hotel thing. But the drama between players hasn't really reached a degree, and that's for several reasons. Language barriers, older people playing the game in general, various other things. The tensions haven't drawn to the point where money matches are typically a settling the beef thing in fighting games anymore. In Marvel 2, it was a big deal. In Marvel 3, it's happened. In Street Fighter 4, we almost saw that Luffy versus Santaro Man thing, but that didn't even flesh out. So I just think it's on the players to dislike or have enough beef with each other, fake or not, for it to happen. Whereas in Melee, like, everything's about the drama.
People are calling up, speaking of drama, LTG versus Viscount, which was hilarious. I mean, it was more meme-worthy than interesting to watch a match. We also got some other shout-outs here to Smug and I'm Still Daddy.
Drama brings in people. I mean, LTG versus Viscount. Viscount will tell you first and foremost that Street Fighter 4 is like his 6th best fighting game, and LTG is like not a tournament-level player, at least high level. So, I mean, no one was watching that to see, like, godlike play. They were just watching it because it was ridiculous. And it was ridiculous. And it's, like, one of the most popular things that's ever come out of our little community. It was on World Star, YouTube, everything. So, I mean, like,
we made it, boys. How do you guys feel about that? I'll start with you. Go ahead.
It's always going to be a part of the community. I mean, these games are one-on-one, me versus you. I know I can beat you. If you beat me in a fluke in tournament, well, it's not going to be a fluke because I suck. But if you beat me, I want to get some of that pride back. And a money match, that's a way to do it. Let's make it count for something real. Screw that tournament. But the one thing I would like to see with money matches, exhibitions in general, something real behind it.
Money's not real, Steve?
Money is real. Money is real. That's why I like money matches. But just in terms of greater exhibitions, I think we've seen, like, especially after Low Tier God and the Scan, a lot of tournaments tried to present something in that vein, and it wasn't really interesting because the beef wasn't real, and
I agree. It's so bad pre-set up. I've never, and this is occasionally it can happen, all right, but if there's no sort of background behind it, it tends to be two guys sandbagging in a 1st to 5. I mean, that's just what it is.
Okay. Yeah. I have two names for you. Tommy Guns versus Crack Fiend at Absolute Battle. That was hype.
They actually did not like each other, though, and there was background to that match.
Okay, but it was set up. Oh, you mean like if you're faking it?
I mean, like if a tournament organizer just puts two guys against each other for the sake of having a good match, it ends up being them sandbagging. That just doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Even if it's for a little bit of money, it's normally thrown up by a third party, and they typically agree to split it beforehand. And I'm going to be totally real here. That's what happens. If there's no actual beef between the players in the first place, typically the match isn't going to be interesting unless it's in tournament.
We're getting into WWE realm now, though. We're getting into the show and who has more to lose, who slept with whose girlfriend, like the drama behind it. And the Tommy Guns thing, that was so interesting because Tommy Guns is seen as such a villain. And we talked about Leffen earlier. Leffen's such a villain in the crowd. And then you have a really emotional player in Crack Fiend. Yeah, I want to see what happens. And it really wasn't. How much was that for? Do we even know? And
was that just a grudge match, or was it for money?
No, it was supposed to be for hundreds of dollars or thousands, and then Tommy reduced it down to like 40 or 70
okay.
or something.
We're gonna
$6 and some pocket lint. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't about the money to people. It was about the drama, and I'm sure that has its place in the community, but we're thinking about we're so commonly thinking about things in terms of the tournament play and the more professional idea of the esports side of the FGC, and what we're talking about now is like I say, the WWE drama side of things. So I don't know,
Steve.
I just think that if you get a match where there is actual conflict between the players, it just makes things so good. I'm not a huge Mortal Kombat fan, but I did watch this one exhibition, which was about, I don't know, 13 or so weeks ago.
I like what you did there.
So, and it got me interested because I know Sonic Fox is a great player. I know Perfect Legend is a great player, despite what he showed that weekend. And, I know that they actually want to beat each other. They want to prove that one of them is the better player. That's compelling to me. Santaro versus Luffy, that was compelling because this was a guy who's like, I don't care what the matchup is, with Rose versus the guy. I can beat you. I will put my money on the line to prove it. That speaks to me.
Yeah, it's just hard to force it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, John.
This is something that we started doing. I say we, I mean like Level Up started doing and such with Wednesday Night Fights right before Super Close. They were doing things like grudge matches, and that's where the Viscount and Low Tier God thing came about. I did a ridiculous drinking match for like $500 with Lapchi one week, and they were doing these things, but it was the idea behind that was supposed to be maybe you got beat by someone in tournament and there was that pride thing, and then you had a dispute, and Valle would like interview the people beforehand and have them talk their smack, and that was widely successful. So yeah, like I see where you guys are coming from with this, and I think that it can have its place in the community, and sometimes it comes up organically. But I mean, are we trying to promote this idea, and then does it lose its not originality, but does it lose its fervor because we're promoting it, trying to get drama to start, or not?
I agree. Harnessing it is kind of hard when it's something that you said is so organic. And the question is are we looking for the drama, or are we looking for good matches? As far as looking for good matches, I would think it'd be interesting if, we saw something where good players were thrown in a room to play each other in, casuals where they can actually just show off stuff, give people things to watch, etc. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely different than, throwing them against each other at a tournament last minute and calling it a hype money match. I'd rather see it as something that isn't meant to be a money match if it's not going to be for the drama. If the money's not on the line for the sake of it being, something that they both care about, then just throw them in a room and let them play each other, and then make sure they're not, sandbagging for the tournament. But it's hard to come up with a good way to do that.
Speaking of, go ahead. Go ahead,
I was
buddy.
just going to say that's going to be tough to do when you're asking players, hey, play your hearts out, but, this match doesn't really mean anything. So that's... you want to just avoid the drama just for the sake of drama. But if it's a money match, if it's, something that's got a legit grudge behind it, you're going to see these players hopefully bring everything they got. And that's what makes an entertaining match for me.
All right, guys, we're going to move on to our next topic. There was a tournament that went down over the weekend in Arizona called Rewired. And I was watching the top three. I won't spoil who won the tournament, but prior to that match, actually, Velociraptor, do you want to set us up for this, what we're going to see here? Did this guy just leave? He's gone. He left. Oh, my God. All right. Well, behind me, you can see Velociraptor versus Tommy Guns. This is the, is it Losers Finals?
Are you on me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now that I have the internet to talk to about this, first of all, good games to Tommy Guns. You caught me. I am not good at adjusting on the spot to ridiculous shenanigan characters, and you beat me. You beat me fair and square. Good job. Given the time to go back and watch the match, I don't even need to go back and watch it. I know exactly what was happening, and I knew what was happening while it was happening. I just couldn't get my fingers to change and follow what my head was thinking. But anyways, Tommy Guns, I will gladly fight you again in a grudge match should you want to take the challenge.
Hey, you can't harness that. Don't fabricate it, all right? If it's not a real grudge match, don't force it.
Oh no! There's the thing. I roomed with the guy. I was staying in the hotel, and and we were. It was a quiet night after that. I can tell you that.
Tommy is really serious about playing versus everyone who's ever lived in California and proving something, and we'll see how far he goes with that.
Well, I actually reached out to Tommy Guns and got a quote from him. I wanted to see if he had anything to say to you, John, and are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Tommy Guns, quote, "Please tell John he's a good guy, but he is seriously overrated. Cali, Arizona is trash, and Texas is here to play." Mm-hmm. Your response, John?
Name however I play you up to what's his limit, like $40 or something like that. I'll put that much on the line. We can go up to like a couple hundred if he wants. I know he has it right now because that was like a $700 difference of winnings right there. So before he goes and spends it on whatever, I'll play him. I'll play him for it. And I'm still getting over the. I drank so much that night, guys. Like, I don't even drink anymore.
Come on, no excuses. Come on, but hey.
No, afterwards, not beforehand.
Afterwards. Okay. You drowned your sorrows.
I'm definitely feeling it. Yes, Tommy Guns, you won. Good job. It will not happen again. You name a time and a place, I will meet you there, and we will do this.
All right, I was going to keep you on the hook and keep ragging you about it because of this part right here where you switched to Honda, which did not seem to work out in your favor.
No. And I used to have a Honda. I still have a Honda. But I was actually talking to Tommy the day prior, and he was saying, actually Honda's a really hard matchup. And I believe he switched characters to Seth when he played our other resident Honda here. So I was like, well, that first game didn't go very well, but maybe I can get the change of pace going here with Honda. It didn't work out because the same issues that I had with Goken, I had with Honda as well. Just letting him get in for free and then not being able to block or reversal on my wake up was what that whole thing came down to. But I admit that I wanted to feel it out because I had 3 games to deal with it, and I no regret for going to Honda. I'm like, I wanted to figure it out, and I did, and there it is.
Okay, you're off the hook. We're done talking about this. I definitely wanted to rag on you a little bit, John. We're going to talk about Capcom Pro Tour Asia as the final topic on the show, but first, I promised this guy that we talk about this. What's going on in the anime world, Danka, please?
Well, Blaze Blue CF Central Fiction is coming out this week in Japanese arcades only. As of right now, it adds 2 new characters, a new mechanic, and a bunch of balance changes to the previous characters. And I said 2 new characters, but they actually just announced that 9, a character who was previously in the series as part of the story, is going to finally be playable. Also, Nitro plus Blasters.
The hell's that? What's
it's
Nitro
an
plus
anime
Blasters?
game using properties that Nitro Plus owns.
What is Nitro Plus? Guys,
what is
can either of you
that
help
is
me
coming
out?
out in December. Thanks for letting the anime community have time on the show, Efren.
Hey, thanks, man. I want to learn. That's why I have you on here. I need to know more about these anime games.
But none of them will matter come February, right, guys? Yeah.
For you too, you can play Street Fighter 5. No, you're excited for Blaze Blue.
Not with that attitude. Bring your game to the event, man. Have some fight for it.
No, I'm excited for Blaze Blue. I had a lot of fun with it at the both past 2 Evos. And it'll be interesting to see. It probably, most of us in the anime community do not think it will make it into Evo. They think Guilty Gear Xrd will probably make it in again over Blaze Blue, despite Blaze Blue will be slightly newer at the time. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to say if either of them will even make it. With the 7-game announcement, who knows? It could be Street Fighter 1 through 5. So
they're gonna have the original. They're gonna have.
I would love to see a high-level Street Fighter 1 tournament.
You mean like pre?
There's like 5 versions of 4.
There's alpha. You can get alpha in there. But no, seriously, I do give a shit about anime. Every time there's some anime news. We'll see an Edition Select tournament
before we see Blaze Blue at Evo again.
Who was it that said that? It was Aliun that wanted.
Aliun said he wanted an Edition Select tournament over Street Fighter 4, which I agree. But
before we leave the anime topic, I always ask you about anime stuff, right?
Right.
You told what's the meme most popular because you said Guilty Gear, the current iteration of it, was not your favorite.
But I mean, this is getting purely opinionated. My favorite anime game currently out that's currently played is Blaze Blue.
So you're excited for Central Fiction?
I'm excited for Central Fiction.
Moving on, Capcom Pro Tour Asia went down over the weekend. It was a culmination of all the Capcom Asia events, and then you had the grand finals, and whoever won that would get a spot at the Capcom Cup. Punko won. He had already qualified. So, Steven, you are our Daily Dot expert. You write these awesome articles. In fact, the reason you're the expert, man. The reason why we brought you on the team was specifically because you were writing about Capcom Cup and the Capcom Pro Tour. So, what are some of those things that happened over the weekend? You mentioned a couple of things that you wanted to touch on, and that was Kindevu, for example. Kindevu came close.
Kindevu came really close. Coming into this tournament, you had 9 players. Kindevu, who qualified on the last chance qualifier on Friday, and then the 8 players who were already in. Xiaohai, Dako, Shen, Nemo, Punko, MOV, Bonchen, and Mise. Of those 9, Nemo, Shen, and Bonchen had already qualified through premier events, so they couldn't get the spot. Of the other 6, Xiaohai and Punko were already in on points, so they could win the spot, but if they did, it would open up a point spot. So Mise was the next guy in. He could qualify for Capcom Cup by winning himself, or if Punko won, or if Xiaohai won. So he had basically the best chance to get in. And then after the first day, the only 3 guys who could qualify besides him, 2 of them were already out of the running. Dako went 0-3 to start, and then MOV was at 2-3. He lost early, so he was pretty much out. So it's just down to Kindevu. He needed to run the table and have other results go his way to get into grand finals and have a chance of knocking out Punko. And he did that. He beat MOV. He beat Bonchan in a really good match. And then he 3-0'd Mise. And almost every other game that he needed to go his way did, up until the last one, where he needed Xiaohai to beat Nemo at the very end. Nemo ended up winning that one 3-2 in a very close game. So Nemo actually won on the tiebreaker.
I was very confused. I mean, the parts I watched, considering this crazy ass schedule, right? And of course, you can't always just accommodate Western audiences, but I was confused as to why somebody made it into grand finals versus the other person. There was these weird rules. It was round robin, so it basically means everybody plays everybody. John or Steven, who can explain to me?
Yeah, there was in these types of tournaments with the round robin, if there's a tie, traditionally it goes down to the game differential. So have you won more individual matches than you've lost as compared to your opponent, or whoever it is you're tied with? But in this one, head-to-head matchups took precedence over the game differential. So even though Kindevu had a game differential of +4 and Nemo only had +3, I think it was because Nemo beat Kindevu when they played, he won. And that's also what you'll see in like I think the NFL, for those of you that follow that. Like if you've beaten the team that you're tied with, then you get to advance. And so it was kind of weird because that's not usually, I don't think, the way things like Topanga work, if I'm not mistaken. But that was what this was. And so in the end, Nemo was the one that went to grand finals instead of Kindevu.
And it got even more confusing because you had G, who was on during the early part of Sunday commentary. He was saying that he was making it clear that head-to-head was the tiebreaker. But they brought on other commentators to close the night, or at least close the round robin part of the night before the 3-hour break before grand finals. And they were saying that game differential was the tiebreaker. So there was a lot of confusion in the chat. There was confusion on the graphic that they used on screen because it misrecorded a couple of results. There was confusion on the challenge bracket because they misrecorded the Mise versus Kindevu match, so it looked like Mise had qualified for grand finals. So there was just confusion all over when they went off the air. I was trying to tell everybody, no, it's Nemo. And they got it cleared up eventually. And then
I can't
At
imagine.
the end, it didn't matter. No one was beating Punko.
Well, next year I can't imagine. I mean, this was like the culmination of all these very impressive and thoroughly pre-planned Asian tournaments, right? I'm surprised to have seen some of that confusion. And then I think it was you, Steve. I was reading one of your tweets. Shout outs to events at like trade shows, right? Is basically where it was, which gets to be a little bit. You have to deal with that schedule. At one point before grand finals, all right, we'll see you in 4 hours. It's like, what? 4 hours? I'm trying to watch this. I had my popcorn ready. But the round robin thing is interesting to me, but also this 1-to-7 set for actual, once you actually got to the grand finals, a 1-to-7 set. What I want to engage you guys on, in particular our tournament players, John and Donka, is if you're in a tournament and it's usually a best of 3, and then they throw you a 1-to-7, how does your game change, Donka?
I mean, players are good at totally different things. I know players who I would bet against anyone in a 1-to-10 that I wouldn't bet to make it past 0-2 in a typical tournament format. It's a totally different game plan, and it requires a lot more adaptation and a lot more studying of your opponent probably beforehand. So I don't know. Was it known it was going to be best of 7 the whole time?
Steven?
Yeah, the rules.
Yeah, it was in the rules. It was the same thing they did last year.
Cool.
Yeah, so I mean, at that point, it's pretty exhausting for a lot of people, especially at the end of the tournament. And I think it kind of takes away some of the impact of each match, and it's different. I don't think it's a good format personally for the end of a tournament to have a 1-to-7. It sounds great, like it's gonna the truly better player is gonna win. And in a lot of ways, that might be true. Yeah, the player who adapts and learns the matchup better ends up winning. But I think it takes a lot of excitement out of each individual match, and I just think it's not the way tournaments should work. Best of 7 is way too long.
Do you guys agree? John, do you agree with Donka?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind when you say let's have a best of 7 at the end of it is that, yes, that's going to be much more definitive. There's going to be no question as to who's the better player because you're not going to scrub out 7 wins or something like that. And then, but these guys, they're not scrubs. And it's going to come down to set play now and who can adapt better. And it almost becomes like, if your whole tournament was who can win in a 1-to-5 set, and it's just changed to who can win in a 1-to-7 set, you might be measuring something different about these players. You could still go with that because that could just mean, all right, you're this good in the 1-to-5 realm. Are you also this good in the 1-to-7? Because ultimately that's just as valid as a 1-to-5 realm, and are you a more well-rounded player? So you could argue for that. But it does change the pace of the tournament or the kind of the feel of it. And like Donka said, that kind of diminishes in some ways the rest of the matches being all 1-to-5s.
Yeah. It's, I absolutely agree with you on that. As a fan, though, it's tough for me to say, hey, would I rather see Punko and Nemo play 5 games or 13 games? If I want to watch some high-level play, I would love to see them play as long as they want. So,
Steve, the article that you wrote for us is titled Punko Shines at the CPTA Asia Finals. How did you feel about Punko? I mean, you're talking about wanting to watch a lot more matches, right? Talk to us about Punko. What'd you think?
Well, Punko's a guy who we haven't really seen too much of. He was very active in the first part of the season. Well, we haven't seen too much of him as of late on the Capcom Pro Tour. Let me clarify that. He was very active from like February to May. He won cans at the beginning of the season. He took a bunch of top 3s up until May. And then he just didn't go to many events. And the ones he did, he ran into Fudo and lost. I mean, Fudo beat him at Southeast Asia Majors. He beat him at EVO. He beat him at Tokyo Game Show. He didn't make top 16 at any of those. So coming into this tournament, the thinking was, well, maybe he's not firing on all cylinders. And then after that first loss against Shen 3-0, right at the beginning of Saturday, we thought, well, maybe he's not all the way back yet. Guess what? He's all the way back.
He's definitely back, yes.
Well, I mean, these are all the things that we have on the docket today to talk about, guys. Unless you have any final thoughts on Capcom Pro Tour Asia. Of course, we have some tournaments coming up that are still part of the Capcom Pro Tour. And I know, Steve, you wanted to mention that.
Yeah, there's one. It's actually not part of the tour, But this weekend, Street Grand Battle out in France is going to have a ton of the players that are going out to DreamHack Winter on Thanksgiving weekend. So Luffy's going to be there, Ryan Hart, Promex, a lot of the European players, but also a decent international presence as well. Gamerby is going to be there. Yubiken, Santaro and Kichiken going to be there. Human Bomb. Kiyoma's coming out from Brazil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, possibly. K-Brad was scheduled to show up. That's kind of in the air right now with what happened over the last few days. But Dominion has expressed interest in possibly showing up. So that is going to be quite a good event to watch as sort of a warm-up to DreamHack Winter.
We totally forgot to talk about one of my favorite players, which is Pierre Balrog. He went to that last chance qualifier so he could make it into the Capcom Pro Tour Asia Grand Final, or the event that we're talking about. He did not make it past the qualifier, did he, Steve?
He finished in third. He made it to winners finals, but then he lost to Kendevu in winners finals, and then he lost to Gact in losers finals. So he didn't get to play on Saturday and Sunday. And right afterwards, he tweeted out, let me quote it directly. GG's, everyone. Couldn't focus on the last two matches. I won't be going to DreamHack anymore. Not worth it for me. Time to enjoy Singapore. So he had already said he was going to DreamHack Winter, regardless of what happened anywhere else. Now it's up in the air, and he's a player who can be very emotional. Mm-hmm. A lot of times that helps him if he gets on a roll. So I was thinking maybe it was just heat of the moment decision. A couple days later, he'll calm down and reconsider. But he also tweeted out that his fire for Ultra is gone, and a new fire will rise with Street Fighter V. So looks like we're going to see Capcom Cup without PR Rock.
It sounds that way. That's a shame. But then again, there's always next year, right, guys?
Yes.
All right, guys, that brings us to the end of the show. We talked about a lot of things, and if you missed any of it and you want to hear more about it, of course, the video will be up on YouTube, usually within 12 hours. I want to thank our guys on our panel here. We have, from Event Hubs, John Velociraptor Guerrero. We're always happy to have this guy and bring his knowledge, and, of course, share a little bit of that knowledge of stuff that's happening on Event Hubs. We have our very own Ace King Offsuit, the man, the myth, the legend, doing all those charts and schedules. And, of course, as always, the professor, Michael Donka-Schiller.
I try to be here most of the time.
Anime PhD, right? No?
It's not going to matter. I don't know. I can rant for hours. But
And I'm your host, Efren Salinas. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what you see, let us know. If you want to see something else, let us know. You can follow us on Twitter, daily.esports. You can like us on Facebook. And, of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel where all this and other content will be up. And don't forget, on Thursday, our Smash Bros. AMA, we have SFAT to talk about a lot of things, but potentially also that Leffen Money match. Thank you very much for watching, guys. See you next week.